Hello, friends. I'm Heidi Gaiman from HeidiGaiman.com, and tonight is Hope Talks Happy Hour. And so, our Hope Talks, I can't, the words are hard tonight. Our Hope Talks Happy Hour are 20 to 30-minute conversations about some areas of our life that we could use some hope. We give some mental health information, of course, always. We talk about genuine relationships, and we talk about hope in Jesus. And sometimes when that is hard to see, hope in the smaller things that help us get there, right? And so tonight we're going to talk about hope in family dynamics. And while we let people gather a little bit, I'm going to show you my happy hour snacks. I hope you have a happy hour snack. If you have a happy hour snack or drink, or, it can just be water, who cares? But for fun, to bring a little warmth to the celebration, we are having a little Friendsgiving with our family dynamics discussion. Here's my beverage. It doesn't look very pretty. I didn't think about that. I really am a big fan of canning jars to drink out of. We quickly went through multiple sets of glasses after we got married because the dishwasher messed them up or we broke them. And then I discovered canning jars. I am not above saving pickle jars and olive jars and spaghetti sauce jars and washing them up and using those either. So this is my bourbon with apple cider recipe. You can find it on the Hope Talks Happy Hour event page if you're interested. It's not complex, but it is sure to wow at a good holiday celebration. So there you go. I probably shouldn't drink too much of it while we talk about family dynamics, right? And then I do have my appetizer. Again, nothing that I brought tonight looks really pretty, but it is date stuffed with gingerbread goat cheese, which is one of my favorite things. And it's super easy, and you can see the little recipe on the event page as well. I got my ingredients inexpensively at my favorite neighborhood grocery store. And so they had like an eggnog flavor goat cheese too that I'm hoping to try this week. There's a cranberry one and a blueberry one. They know Heidi's dairy free and she would like the good goat cheese. Thank you. All right, so hope for family dynamics. Let's talk about that. If you have some questions, go ahead and throw them up in the comments and I'll be looking for those if you have any kind of questions. Now, we don't want to have very specific questions with names and things like that, just in order to maintain anonymity and because this is not therapy, and we want to kind of talk broadly, if you will, so that it's the internet and we keep some confidentiality in the spaces that you need it, and we don't step outside of the realm of what we're doing here tonight. So, but questions, feel free to throw them up. I'd love to hear from you. We have 3 different parts to what we're going to be talking about tonight. Excuse me. First, where is the hope in messy family dynamics? And so we're just going to talk about a way, looking at the concepts of brokenness and restoration, which is heavily covered in my book, Finding Hope from Brokenness to Restoration. But we also talk about it in Mighty Mysterious and a couple other of my books and studies if you have picked any of those up. But at the same time, I think this is a concept that is so basic about the narrative of humanity. Like everyone since the beginning of time has experienced these things that it's so easily missed. Like we see the tree of our life, if you will, and we miss the forest as a whole. So we'll talk about that hope to kind of bring that in, and a couple of stories from the Bible and a couple of stories from our own lives about family dynamics and hope there. And then we'll also talk about how do we share hope with family members. That's actually the third thing. How do we share hope with family members? And then where's the hope in messy family conversations on hot button topics, which is maybe one of the ones you're waiting for in our world today, right? So like I said, feel free to throw up any comments, any questions. I definitely want to hear from you. And I want to know, before we get started on the big hope of brokenness and restoration and family dynamics, what kind of messy family dynamics do you see in your life, in the world around you, in the lives of those you communicate with each day? What kind of messy family dynamics do you see? When we say messy family dynamics, what are we talking about? I think for me, one thing when I was a young adult was that it became really evident when I went to a Christian college, and I had not really, that was like my first foray, if you will, into um, a heavily Christian environment. And I thought everyone had really perfect families. And mine was um, blended and complicated and had a backstory. And so that was really stressful for me when I looked around me and felt like that was so specific to my story and wasn't part of other people's stories. And so I wanted to make sure that I got myself a perfect little family. And when I got married, I wanted to make sure that it was just right, and that when we had kids, it would be just right. And the reality is we can't control things like that, nor is God in the business of only valuing what is perfect and pretty, especially because we do live in brokenness, and we live in a world that's just it's going to be messy till Jesus comes back again, and that's what is your breed of messiness instead of I'm messy, you're not. And so that was one thing that was kind of shocking to me as a young adult. And so making sure the teens and young adults in our life, I think in that transition, I feel really passionately about helping them see that we're all messy and being honest about that, especially in families and in our churches, in our workplaces, even when we have conversations about anything to help people understand that we don't have everything like wrapped up neatly in a bow in our life. That requires a little bit of vulnerability, and you have to kind of gauge that dependent on the relationship. But I think when we are able to enter into relationships deeply enough to share a little bit of our story, then people feel more free to share some of their story as well. Okay, so I need to text my family, talk about messy family dynamics, and tell them to get off the internet because I think they're messing up my stream right now, it says, according to Facebook. So real fast, everyone off the internet. Does anyone ever have to do this at their house? Anyway, all right. So welcome to my home in Michigan. If you're just joining us, if you are familiar with joining a Heidi Gaiman live of any kind, you'll notice that the background's different because we're in a new place. And so welcome to my home. Let's start with hope for family dynamics. So where is the hope in messy family dynamics? This has to do, like I said, with that brokenness and restoration piece. As I just told the story, that we all have our own breed of brokenness, right? So like there's this, we all have sin in ourselves and in our lives. We all are affected by other people's sin, but also we're just affected by the fact that the world isn't quite the way it should be. It isn't all pleasant. There's growth to be had from that, but at the same time, sometimes it's just stinky. Sometimes it's hard. And being honest about that goes a really long way. And so let's look at a little bit of the narrative. And I know some of you who have joined me before, you're maybe like, Heidi, stop going on about the narrative. But in Genesis 2, you know, when you go there and God creates humanity and he creates this big wide world and he creates forests and lakes and farmlands, if you will, and he creates just so much beautiful stuff and then puts in that humans and he calls them very good and they're really good. That's a good thing. But then what happens next, right, is that it doesn't go, I think, as planned, but at the same time, that doesn't mean it wasn't God's plan. And that's really theologically complicated. So understand that I think that God knows all. He's all-knowing, but he doesn't necessarily work us like puppets, right? And that is a good thing. I think that's part of the very good, right, that you get in Genesis. And so God looks at things for the long game instead of what's going to happen and the struggles and the problem right this second, that he is concerned about our struggle now, just like he was concerned about Adam and Eve's struggle then, right? When they ate the fruit of the tree, he doesn't stay far away. Instead, he comes to them and says, how did that go? You know, where are you? he checks in with them, and he does the same thing for us in our daily struggle with our family dynamics. But then he is, I hate to use the word more. That's not great language because it's more complicated than that, right? So he's concerned about the moment, but he is concerned about this bigger story. And so he knows when Adam and Eve have done that, he knows before they've done that, that Jesus is going to come. He knows that that's the story. And so he knows that that's the story for your family too. No matter where they are in their life, no matter where they are in their belief, sometimes it helps to remember that God sent Jesus for them too. God sent grace for them too, even if they don't know it. Even if they don't know it. And so we can believe as Christians that he is active in that he's working grace, and we want to share hope with them. We'll get to that. But at the same time, for us to know that grace is for everyone around us means that we're not like the masters of grace. We don't have to hold it close to our chest, right? Instead, we can share it freely with all the people around us, right? We can like bring it, like there's a meme that says sprinkle kindness like candy. Like that's how grace is for us. Just sprinkle it far and wide. And so I don't know that anyone put, let me see, check my screen. Awesome. Yeah, Karen said left wing, right wing family members. And because of your comment earlier on political conversations, I'm assuming you mean like in a political fashion. People have, differing views. And so that's one part of messy family dynamics, politically, belief systems, values, things like that. But they also have differing extreme views at times. And that's where it gets really challenging, right? If we can kind of land a little bit more in the middle when we share our views, even if we feel really passionate about that, that's going to be really helpful for messy family dynamics. We'll talk about boundaries in a second with that too. And so Lindsay says, honest in our messiness. Good stuff. Good, right? We have to be honest about it. And I think it's hard, but remember, we all have our own breed of brokenness. It's not like it's specific to me. That's what shame feels like, is that I am broken. But instead, one thing God tells us and one thing that grace tells us is that this is just the reality for all of us. We are all experiencing brokenness in the world around us, inside of us, and within our relationships. He has the solution though, right? That there is repair for that. That there's little tiny repairs of kind of redemptive work in our lives, whether we know Jesus or not. And then when we know Jesus, we have that grace. So our conversations can look different no matter who we're standing in front of. And so that repair in relationships, I think, is a huge testimony of God. So how many of you have experienced repair in your relationships? And you can just throw a hands up or a like up in the comments or whatever if you've experienced repair in a relationship, like where a relationship has had maybe a hard season or maybe a big hard season, or an argument that was kind of ugly, but then there was some work done by God and by yourselves, or by someone who loved you both or whatever, so that there could be some hope in that messiness, right? That's one way that we see hope in messy family dynamics. And I do hear from a lot of people right now that they're a little bit anxious about going back to family gatherings at Thanksgiving and Christmas and maybe other ones, depending on, what area of the world you're at and stuff. But that it is challenging that we got maybe a little pass on that with COVID. COVID is a beast and it has some terrible, terrible things and, many, many terrible things, especially the loss of lives and more. It also has these tiny little gifts, and sometimes the hope is found there, right? So we look at the tiny gifts, and I think that little break was really helpful for some of us. And it's okay to be honest with yourself about that. Be honest, especially with your partner. Be honest with someone that's close to you. So you can say, hey, very excited that, maybe we're not on lockdown anymore, but man, I am wondering how this is going to go. at my family Thanksgiving table or at my Christmas parties or whatever. Like, wow, I got to pass on my social anxiety. I didn't realize was such an ordeal for me. So just kind of sharing it with someone is one way that we're able to see hope in those things. So yeah, oh good. Darla says she's, yeah, working on some of those repairs, which is good. So that's part of the process, right? So in that narrative of God, from brokenness to restoration, so the brokenness we see in Genesis 3, in his word, and then we know that Jesus comes, there's redemption, and he's doing that redemptive work in our lives once and for all. But then he's restoring, right? He's coming again. He sent the Holy Spirit, but one day he's coming back, and there won't be this brokenness anymore. The families will be complete. Again, it sounds so like foundational that we miss it sometimes. It sounds so basic and even not helpful. It's not a tip. It's a theological truth. But sometimes reminding ourselves of that theological truth, that there is restoration. I may not see it this moment, but I am seeing it. God's got a long game, is really helpful for those messy family dynamics. So anyway, let's see. Let's look at a couple more family dynamics. Setting boundaries is a huge one, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. No one loves boundaries. Actually, I mean, some of us have had enough experience that we were like, well, that didn't go well without boundaries, so yay, boundaries. But at the same time, they're never comfortable for people. Like, setting them usually is met with some kind of tension from other people. So even when we're able to walk well in them, it's hard for the other people often. And sometimes it's just hard for us. Boundary setting can be really challenging. And so you're not alone if that's true for you. And we'll talk about boundaries in a second. And then also, there's this hope in the fact that it won't always be like this way that we just talked about, but that God does also have hope right now. So, we can go too far on either end where we're like, it feels like it's always going to be this way. Relationships are challenging. I'm stuck in this conversation with, cousin Bob or Aunt Mildred, and they have, sorry to Bobs and Mildreds out there, they have these really extreme political ideas, and now I'm just like, it feels like so hard in the moment. Or then there's other stuff, right? We're sad for someone we love and maybe some decisions they've made. We also things feel heavy often, like maybe we lost someone to COVID or to something else and they're not at the table this year. That's challenging. And so know this, that yes, it won't always be this way. God will restore in the long game. Then also know this, right? That he does do his work right now. And sometimes I need help seeing that. And so that's when we turn to those people around us, our friends and mentors, and use words and say, that was heavy for me. This thing is hard for me. This thing is challenging for me. So find maybe even in your family dynamics, your family dynamic buddy, right? Someone who can help you see the hope. Hope, we know from research, is a thought process. That it isn't necessarily an emotional experience, but at the same time, it's like closely tied to our emotions, very confusing, but that we often receive it in relationship with other people, that it comes into us, if you will, into our lives, into our bodies, into our hearts and minds through other people's reminders and care, concern, check-ins, things like that. And so find your family dynamic buddy when you are in need of a little bit of reassurance, or just say like, okay, this is really hard for me and I just need a little hope right now. Like let's talk about some tiny hope and some big hope. Okay, a couple of family dynamics in the Bible, just because the Bible is so descriptive, right, of the human experience. Like that is, I firmly believe, one reason the Bible's so big and that God gives us so much of it is that he wants us to be able to see so much of the commonalities of the human experience. And so they had family problems too. Goodness gracious, they had family problems. And so one of my favorite restoration stories is Joseph. in the Hebrew scriptures, in the earlier part of the Bible, in Genesis, when his family, and it's a big hot mess, right? They sell him into slavery. At first, they try to kill him, decide to sell him to slavery, lie about it to his dad. It's like a lot of family drama. Like we all have family drama, and they had big family drama, right? But then there is this restoration piece if you look in Genesis, and it is truly beautiful. So beautiful that it's one place in the Bible where we know that Joseph is so overcome with emotion that he has to like step away. Like there's such a big piece of humanness in that. Have we ever been in a place where we just need to like step away, either because of the struggle or because of the restoration being so big? It's nice to know that both of those are real and alive in our lives. And then the next one I think is especially hopeful when our family dynamics are extremely messy and hard and occasionally non-existent, right? Sometimes what we call our family of origin, the families we grew up in, were not there for us or hurt us in many ways. Maybe we feel like they turned on us at different times, or maybe that's true of just a specific family member. This passage in Matthew 12:46 through 50 tells us that Jesus changes the concept of family. That he says to his disciples when they tell him that, you know, his mama wants him, he says, "Who are my mothers and my brothers?" And that is one indication to us that Jesus is going to make places for a new idea of family. And so not just we care for the widow and the orphan and the sojourner, even though that's real, but not in the way that it was in the Hebrew scriptures, not in the way that it was in the Levitical law and stuff of the early scriptures. Instead, now it's just alive with hope because Jesus says, I'm going to give you more. Like when you're in lack, I'm going to open the idea of family to who you need in your life right now. And I think sometimes that is an invitation to pray. If we don't see that alive and well in our lives, to be able to pray and say, I need someone to be family to me. And I pray that you've experienced the concept of framily, if you will, that you've had friends that feel like family to you. And if not, that's a great thing to pray for. It's a great thing to actively seek. And tell the people in your life, like, I want deeper relationships. You might be surprised. There's a lot of people out there looking for that too. And I know it's not as easy, all that. But in Finding Hope, we do talk a little bit more about what makes a relationship get started and also what keeps it going and growing. And so that's might be a reason why you want to pick up the book. Okay, so next part, where's the hope in messy family conversations? Here's some basic tips, if you will, from my therapeutic practice and genuine relationship research and things. One, I read a devotion to my kids the other day, and I couldn't help but mention it, but it was from Bob Goff, if any of you have read some of his work. And he has the Love Does for Kids and the Everybody Always for Kids series that go along with his books. And goodness, they've been our favorite devotions in our families. And one of the stories he was telling, I don't even remember the like actual storyline, but what I do remember was that the message was, I'm not here to correct them, I'm here to love them. And I think that's a really good line to tell ourselves, especially when people want to get political in our family conversations and discussions, especially when we're in front of a family member who's really challenging. They can believe whatever they want to believe. I'm not here to correct them. I'm here to love them. And I think that goes with how we see God too. Like, do we believe that he made grace available for everyone? Like, he doesn't need people to clean themselves up. I think that translates in our world to people a little bit better when we're willing to kind of take their baggage and roll with the punches. And we're able to share a little bit more of God's hope when we don't make it about the topics, right? And I know that's really complicated, and I know there's a lot of really challenging things that people believe out there. But stepping into the next family meal you have, or the next phone call you have with that challenging family member, to say, okay, this phone call, this one time, I'm just going to try it. I'm just going to love them. And Lord, help me love them. instead of correcting them, and maybe just see how that changes it a little bit. It is, I'm not gonna lie, it's challenging to do, but I believe in you guys. Okay, so the next one is validation without agreement. And so validation, I cannot sell it enough. But validation is a concept where we just hear how people feel and kind of offer that back to them in some way, acknowledging how they feel. So that might be as simple as, or, okay, I hear you feel sad. Okay, that must have been hard. I hear what you're saying. You can rephrase exactly what they're saying, whatever, but we're going to acknowledge the emotions in the room, even maybe some of the ones they're not saying. We'll be careful of assumptions, we don't assume things, but we do want to validate the emotion before we move on to whatever the next piece is. That will go very far in your conversations. Like, wow, it sounds like that topic really gets you a little bit heated. Or, oh, okay, it sounds like you have some passion about this. That does not mean that you're agreeing with people. So validation, just acknowledging where they're at, acknowledging their feelings about the situation and the topic, doesn't mean that you are agreeing with them, but it helps us get to that love piece because people feel heard and seen. Otherwise, I can't tell you enough how often in our world people feel completely unheard and completely unseen. And you've probably felt like that yourself. This is the dynamic that happens when we like really just wanted our partner or our spouse to say, wow, yeah, that sounds like a challenge. But instead they like tried to fix it. Or instead they like kind of like, deer in the headlights look or something like that. And so validation is that simple statement that acknowledges the emotion in the room. And so that is one tip I'd like to give you to try to put into your family dynamics sometime during this holiday season. All right, so let's see. Topic of boundaries can cause friction, especially among family members. Politics are avoided for just that reason. It's true. And it's funny because I do think like, yeah, it's not something we need to talk about, right? If it's not going to go well, we don't need to talk about it. But there seem to be the people in our lives that don't know we don't need to talk about those things all the time, right? And so you can do a lot of head nodding, you can do some smiling. There are ways to be pleasant and validate and not pour some gasoline on the fire of the conversation, right? You all have probably mastered the art of moving to the other room at times. All these things are very good ways of setting boundaries. And it's okay to say like, gosh, you know what I've been thinking about a lot? I've been thinking about the weather. And I've been thinking about, Christmas presents and what I should buy. Like change the topic mid-stride. Be awkward. When in doubt, be awkward. It will throw people off their game. And that's a great possible way to enter into offering some boundaries without it being like adding more friction, if you will. So, oh, good. Yeah. Carrie says working to move from correction to love with the 17-year-old. And that's especially good for that age group too. We do have to correct our children, but at the same time, we know the difference between correction and natural consequences. And, oftentimes natural consequences are some of the most effective things because like kids and teens read them as not like just from us. It has a little bit more impact because this is just the way the world is and we're still acknowledging their feelings and such. And so with teens and maybe our young adult children, that's a challenging dynamic too. Really allowing a little bit of messiness in some of the things that they do or choose, especially where we can, like how they keep their room or things like that aren't going to be like life-altering things, allows us to be able to then like maybe really use it where we need to use it. And then also even in the bigger things, deciding is this the best thing for me right now, is to tell them what I think. Or is there a way for me to let them know, I'm a little concerned about how that's going to go long term, or to say it in a way where you're just presenting the fact that you have some concerns and you're not correcting what they're doing as an expert in the field, if you will. So that's one way to interact, especially with those we love, when we have a real strong feeling that they're wrong is to just present our concerns without believing that we have a absolute right to believing that our opinion is superior. You can see the difference, right? Um, Rebecca says, "Be awkward." I think it is a meme. I would maybe we need like a higher quality meme of that because it was questionable. I think if I remember. Susan says she struggles with being reactive. Thank you for sharing that verbally and saying it, if you will, out loud in the comments. Yeah, absolutely. Practicing the pause. Great tip right there in the comment stream. Yeah, really important to just, you don't have to respond right away. I've learned this really well from my husband, Dave, because he's like an internal processor. Also, I've learned it's not my job to keep the conversation going. Like the silence, it has purpose. Thankfully, that's something, we believe in really strongly in therapy practice, but guess what? I can use it at the family table also. I can use it in a phone conversation. I don't have to be the one saying the next thing. And so if you're uncomfortable, do not feel ashamed to not respond or to even say like, I don't really know how to respond to that. Just, be awkward again. So let's see. Karen says, how do you respond when people want to fix me? That's good. So this is where very useful, which is our last thing in this section that's really good, is what we call non-judgmental stance. Non-judgmental stance is from dialectical behavioral therapy. Again, this is not therapy, but it's a specific skill from the even workbooks and stuff that you can get online for that. And it helps us to respond, again, awkwardly. It's all about awkwardness here tonight, but saying just the facts of the situation. And so when someone wants to fix you, so they say like, I don't know, like, gosh, have you ever thought about like going back to school? It seems like that career's a dead end, or I don't know. I'm trying to like think of things off the spot, but to just be able to say, oh, you think I should go back to school? Mm-hmm. Right. So I'm only stating the fact. I'm not developing more opinions. I'm not like taking in their opinion. And so you can also, this is really challenging and it takes a lot of practice. And so you can even like, this sounds really silly, but comment on things in the room like, oh, okay. So yeah, you're sitting in a chair. Okay. And you are letting me know that that is your opinion. Okay. Like you're just stating some things that are only fact. So looking around you, looking at anything that you can pick up instead of, kind of reacting to the opinion, because again, that's just like gasoline on the fire for people who want to correct and want to share their opinions, which is so helpful, particularly at holiday celebrations, right? Okay, and so know this, and I say this probably in every live, and I know we're going a little over time, but I'm enjoying myself, and I love your comments. It's really, really making me happy tonight. And so we'll wrap up soon here. If you have some questions or comments that you really want to make sure we address, like feel free to throw them up, and we'll still try to get to those. But the last thing is that relationships are always made of vulnerability and boundaries. And again, if you've heard my stuff, you've heard this before. So know that, yes, listening is important to the people we love. That's important. That's part of vulnerability, right? Being willing to hear what they have to say, even if you're not, you feel like, okay, I've been here before. I know I'm not going to love what you have to say. Being able to share some of our emotions about what they have to say, being able to share our thoughts in return. But then also boundaries. So boundaries are vulnerable. So it's funny because they are also, there's an overlap, if you will, a Venn diagram of sorts. And so the boundaries come and you get to decide what your boundaries are. And this is a little bit of work. And I think that's one reason we don't use boundaries very often, is because it's so much work to figure them out sometimes. Like when do I call it quits and be like, you know what? I love you. And I don't think I can talk about the Democratic or Republican Party anymore. Like, I value you so much that I do not think this is a great topic for us. Let's talk about cheese. I don't know. But being able to set that boundary is hard to figure out. So that's work. And then actually doing it is work. And so know that when you think about needing to do that this holiday season, it will go better if you have maybe a little pre-work. kind of an idea of the people that are challenging for you, where you might need to have boundaries. If you need to have like the code word for that social anxiety that we talked about a little bit before, where, I think I'm probably only going to be able to do an hour and a half at this party instead of, the normal like keep it going until midnight or something like that. Letting your member, your family dynamic buddy, or your partner or spouse or someone in your life that you can say, okay, Pickles, like, time to maybe wrap this up, find a reason. Obviously we don't want to like lie to our family members, but be awkward. Feel free to say what you need to say. And then also maybe we don't always have to say the thing that might upset someone. If we can find something else, sometimes that's helpful, so that we're not, again, pouring gasoline on the fire. Let's see. Respect other people's boundaries. This is hard. Again, if you yourself have some beliefs that you really want them to have, whether that is like spiritual beliefs, whether that's faith-based or whether it's values of some other kind. We're not all going to have the same values. And so understanding that and letting other people have their boundaries is really important. Go back to that, like, it's my job to love them, not necessarily correct them. People get to be wrong. There's a whole lot of people who have been wrong before us and a whole lot of people who will be wrong after us. We also get to be wrong, right? There's grace for that. And so we're going to ask God to do his work, like really ask God to do his work in that. And when you can't see it, just know that restoration is there. He's doing some of that work. So the last little bit, how do we share hope with family members who are struggling, right? Because you're going to have that. And I think sometimes that's a little bit of what is challenging in COVID too, because it's exhausting. Like, it's so tiring. We're struggling maybe, and then so many people around us are struggling, and it's just like, okay, so only so many people can fit on the struggle bus at one time. Someone has to drive it. And so just giving yourself a safe place. If you have to go to a family member's house or something this holiday season, finding a safe place within that house, feel free to, take the bathroom pause that's a little extended, to take some deep breaths, do a little bit of mindfulness, look around you, and notice some pretty fixtures in the bathroom so that you have a moment to kind of regroup. That's okay. Or find a safe person at your family gatherings, the person who isn't going to inundate you with political talk. And then also, in order to share hope with family members who are struggling, we need to be their safe space too. Especially this holidays, more than ever, just a balm, right? Just be the person who is willing to listen. If you have that capacity right now, being the person who isn't going to tell them what they need to do, who is going to validate those emotions in the room. That is a way that we can provide some safety. No correction, right? Just love, especially this holiday season. So let's see. See the person's character beyond their words. So when someone has a lot of opinions, see them as someone with whatever's going on in their heart, or what you've seen before, or what their motive is. Very rarely is someone's motive like super, super ugly. Like, okay, that's reserved for like the KKK. And I know all of that is real, and there's some really terrible evils out there. And maybe one of your family members is one of them. But most people that are challenging us in our family dynamics, if they've been abusive to us in some way, hard boundary, right? Like you don't need to surround yourselves with them. You can find whatever excuses you need to do to just take a break at the very least, and also like not be available some of the time or all of the time. And again, that's work to figure that out, what you need. But you also can, when the person is not abusive, when they're just weird, passionate, and want to talk about politics or about, something else that's just odd, knowing that you can just respect who they are as a person and that their heart is pure will really help you be able to get through that conversation, right? Really help you be able to maybe get to a place of even restoration with that person. Again, that validation goes a long way. So if someone's like coming at you too and they have a lot of not just annoying opinions, but are being a little hurtful, again, you can validate, like, I hear that you are angry. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to say anything else. Like, you can just cut that there. And sometimes the validation does its restoration because, again, that person has rarely in their life felt seen or heard for some reason. Okay, and the last one is share how God has worked in your story. This is just really the easiest way for people to see God's restoration work and his redemptive work in the world. Like, they're not going to see it when we're just like, let me tell you about Jesus. Maybe. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But most of the time they just need to hear that that you have hope, that you have had struggles, that you are in struggles, that's real. And sometimes they go places and they get resolved, and sometimes they don't get resolved in this moment. But man, you have seen some work done by God in your life. And so kind of just sorting through a little bit of that ahead of time is really helpful too. If there's someone on your heart that you know this is like the time that you come in contact with them, just finding a way, trying to be natural, right? This isn't like witnessing 101 or weird like evangelism. No, just be yourself. Just talk about the things that matter to you and those other things about Jesus and about hope and about friendship and about the good things of life that you're trying to share with them, maybe, or even like trying to help them get to therapy or whatever else. Like, sometimes we can say the very direct thing, like, gosh, I'm just thinking like therapy might be really helpful, it sounds like, during this time. Or, you know what, I had therapy and that was really, really helpful for me in that struggle that I had. That is another way, right, of sharing hope in your story, and that will translate to them as maybe a little less judgmental at times. Again, don't lie. Don't make up stories, but I'm sure you have some stuff in some ways that he's worked. All right, I have gone far past time, but this has been just awesome to be with you guys. It has been a while. I want to invite you, before I sign off, to our Hope community. And so you'll see information about this on my website, HeidiGaiman.com. And we are going to do a Finding Hope reading group for our online study this January. And so you can find all the details. It's 5 weeks. There's a reading plan. You can do it on your own. You can invite friends. You can do it in a group. There'll be Instagram live videos to join in that are kind of similar to this, but we'll also have those available on my stories and things like that, so that you can pick them up for a little bit if you can't come live. But at the same time, there's all kinds of ways to engage in that Finding Hope reading group. We want to create this hope community, right? To keep that hope really transmitting and translating between each other, so we can go out and do that love instead of correction. And of course, keep being awkward. So I pray that you have some hope in your family dynamics this year. I pray that you are able to take a deep breath, I guess, when it's challenging, and let God do his restoration work, and just ask him, you know what, I need you to show up right now, Lord, because I believe that he has restoration planned in all these things, no matter how messy the family dynamics. All right, thanks for joining me tonight, friends, and I'll see you next time. You can always find me at HeidiGaiman.com.